You know, you would think that choosing the right camera is the easy part of making YouTube videos, but it can be quite the daunting task. I know personally, when I think about upgrading my camera, I look at every single review, comparison video, and I get decision paralysis. Now, of course, these comparison videos on YouTube where they put the footage side by side with two different cameras is very important, and you should definitely consider that when buying a camera. But today I want to try and simplify the process a little bit and give you guys a more broad buying guide. I'm not going to be reviewing a specific model of camera in this video. Rather, I want to stack up different popular styles of camera to help identify which one might be best for you. And these are the four categories of camera I decided to go with. So we have the traditional action camera, represented by the GoPro. Next, we have a mirrorless camera. A good example here is the Sony ZV-E10. It's an interchangeable mirrorless camera, and it's great for making YouTube videos. The next category, and by far the newest and most innovative category, is the 360-degree camera. The go-to example here is the Insta360 X3, and essentially this is an action camera with two lenses, and it has a lot of benefits, and I'm going to dive more into that later on in the video. And that brings us to the final category, which I'm going to say is like specialty. You can call it gimbal, and a prime example here is the DJI Pocket 2. And this brings with it a different set of pros and cons when compared to the other categories, because the big difference here is we have a physical gimbal for image stabilization. Okay, but getting into the filters here, the first and easiest thing you can do to narrow the field is to identify the use case of the camera. So for example, if you want something for action sports, mounting the camera in weird locations, you want to go scuba diving, then obviously an action camera is what you're looking for. And this could be either the single lens or the dual lens. And in contrast to that, if you want something that's going to be primarily used on a tripod, in a studio, you want zoom functionality, then you're gonna have to go with a mirrorless camera. Now, where it gets more difficult is when you talk about a good general all-around use camera, because technically all four of these cameras could fulfill that role. And lots of people do fall into this category and they don't have the budget to buy multiple different kinds of cameras. I know I definitely fall into this category. Sometimes I film inside, and other times I like to film videos on my bike. So with this in mind, the next filters are the following: image quality, depth of field, aka the blurred background, stabilization, and low light capabilities. So beginning with image quality, the number one factor that affects this is the sensor size of the camera. So the bigger the image sensor, the more light it can capture, giving you a higher quality image across all lighting conditions. Also, the larger the sensor, the more you're gonna have that blurred out background effect, which is more high quality and cinematic. And here's a graph of some popular sensor sizes. So the smallest one here in green is 1/2.5 inches. This kind of teal line is a 1-inch sensor. APS-C is another very popular sensor size. And this right here is full frame in blue. And when taking a look at these four different kinds of cameras, here is their corresponding image sensor size. So the GoPro is 1/1.9 inches. Most mirrorless cameras, including the Sony ZV-E10, is APS-C. The Insta360 X3 has a 1/2-inch sensor. And the Pocket 2 from DJI is 1/1.7 inches. So at a glance, we can see that the Insta360 X3 has the smallest image sensor, and thus most of the time is going to give you the worst image quality. That's followed by the traditional action camera, which is just a little bit bigger. Then we have the Pocket 2, which is 1/1.7. And finally, the mirrorless camera with the APS-C size sensor is going to give you the best overall image quality. Now, before moving away from the image quality section, another important consideration here is the lens, aka the field of view, and the blurred background effect. And when it comes to the blurred background, here's a great little example of this. So here we have the Pocket 2 and then the Sony ZV-1. You're going to notice on the Pocket 2 image that, well, first of all, the field of view is a lot wider on this camera, but the other main difference is that everything is in focus, his face as well as the background. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially when you do action sports. You don't want things to be out of focus. But when compared against the ZV-1 image, the background blur really helps to separate the subject from the background, and it gives you a higher quality look to the footage. Now, the next major filter is the stabilization. And this is absolutely huge. Shaky footage can completely ruin a shot. And when it comes to stabilization, we have a few different kinds. We have optical image stabilization, electronic, and hybrid. So optical image stabilization is hardware based. So that means that the actual camera unit inside the body is insulated in some way to minimize vibrations and movement. And electronic image stabilization, on the other hand, is completely software based. And usually the method here is they crop in a little bit on the image, and that gives the software the ability to move around in the frame and stabilize the shot. And lastly, hybrid stabilization is a combination of both. And again, applying that to these four kinds of cameras, the traditional GoPro is electronic image stabilization. Most mirrorless cameras have a hybrid system, allowing you to have both physical and electronic image stabilization. The Insta360 X3 is electronically stabilized, but keep in mind, because this is the widest possible lens, it makes the electronic stabilization super effective. And then finally, the Pocket 3 has a physical 3-axis gimbal holding the camera, making this optically stabilized. Okay, so my quick opinion here on the stabilization. Action cameras in the past couple of years with their EIS has come a super long way. It's actually really impressive just how stable of an image these cameras can produce in extreme conditions. I mean, most action cameras have horizon leveling, so no matter how you turn the camera due to their EIS, their image is always perfectly level. But one huge problem with EIS is when you get into low light situations. Electronic image stabilization completely falls apart in low light and results in a very blurry image. So if you want to maintain the ability to film at dusk or at nighttime, you're going to want to have some kind of physical optical image stabilization. And speaking of low light, that is the final filter here. And the two major factors that affect this is a combination of the sensor size. Again, the bigger the sensor, the more light it can capture, and the type of stabilization they use. And here's an example of a mirrorless camera in low light situations. Notice how you can still see lots of detail, there's not too much blur, and overall it looks pretty good. And here's some footage of an action camera in low light. It looks okay, action cameras are getting better and better, but if you really look at the footage, it is way darker than a good mirrorless camera, and there's lots of that motion blur. And in extreme low light conditions, action cameras are just not capable. Okay, so let's put this all together to help us identify what kind of camera we should be focusing on. Between all these cameras, they have various different sensor sizes, different stabilization methods, and different benefits like durability, 360, and low light. I think it's useful to rank these cameras on a spectrum going from best video performance, so raw image quality, to the most capable overall camera in terms of features. So the most capable camera is going to have the most features, and it's also going to be the easiest to use and get an acceptable shot. But on the other side of the spectrum, these are going to be a lot more difficult to use, have interchangeable lenses, lots of different options in the menu. But if you know how to master that, you can get really high quality cinematic footage. So to me, a 360-degree camera is the most capable piece of hardware on this list. It literally captures everything, and in post you can go in on the software and completely reframe and compose your shot. One of these advantages and features is the invisible selfie stick. So a traditional GoPro is going to look something like this, and here is a 360-degree camera. So that's why as you move down the spectrum, we get to a traditional action camera, which is going to give you slightly better looking footage, although less overall capabilities. Continuing further down to the Pocket 2, we have even better image quality, better stabilization, but the camera is less capable. It's harder to mount it in weird locations, it's not waterproof. And then we ultimately get to the mirrorless camera. It's physically the biggest, often the most expensive, but with the proper lens and the knowledge of how to use it, you can get amazing footage. You're going to get that blurry cinematic background, usable nighttime footage, and to get even better stabilization, you can always buy an external 3-axis gimbal. So what would I buy then? Well, using this spectrum, if I can only buy one camera and I want general use case, I might use it outside as well as inside my studio, then I would probably go with either the DJI Pocket 2 or a traditional action camera. So neither of these cameras are going to give you the most features or the best video quality, but overall they're going to be solid choices. But if I could buy two cameras, I think I would have to go with a 360 and then a mirrorless camera. I think that's a really powerful combination because a 360 camera can do essentially everything. I love the invisible selfie stick, it's great for action sports. But then when you want some more cinematic shots, a blurry background, better low light performance, you can use the mirrorless camera. It's a great combination. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you guys enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.